Hey all, today let's draw the Flash. The Flash we're going to draw today is an amalgamation of two different Flashes. Barry Allen, the Silver Age Flash, and Wally West. I believe he would be the Copper Age Flash from the 80s. He was also the Kid Flash, the sidekick to Barry Allen back in the 60s and 70s. Barry Allen's first appearance was in Showcase number 4 in 1956. The importance of that book is it's considered the first Silver Age title where they brought back superheroes and they gave them more of a science fiction twist instead of just a more grounded reality kind of whatever kind of thing. The second Flash we're going to talk about is Wally West. Wally's first appearance was in the Flash 110 in 1959. He was the sidekick to Barry Allen and the nephew to Iris West, Barry Allen's girlfriend. Wally became the Flash in 1985 during the Crisis of the Infinite Earth story, where Barry had to sacrifice himself to save the universe. He just ran so fast he disappeared, and we'll get to that later too, because that's a fun little thing. It's a little side note in Marvel history of all things, considering Barry is a DC character. Okay, in the drawing here, this one was tough. It took a lot to get done. The pencils anyway, because I decided to do this without reference, which I do all the time, which in this case was a mistake. I got the basic pose in without much of a problem, and I got the punch in the swinging motion, but just to get it somewhere where I liked it, I erased and redrew things many, many times. So for this one, the penciling was the hard point. Also in this drawing, the Flash is fighting Professor Zoom. He's the guy getting punched in the foreground. We're going for a little more action in this drawing because the other ones were pretty much all just poster poses. And now, we got to make things a little more dynamic and a little more action. So we're going to do things like this. Another missed opportunity I had here was I have him fighting Zoom, as I mentioned earlier. But I should have had it been somebody like Quicksilver from Marvel or Makari from Marvel. So that way, we got kind of like the mash up, the what if kind of thing going on. And honestly, Barry would have no problem handling either of those characters, Barry or Wally, because they are far faster than any character in the Marvel Universe, and I'm including people like the Silver Surfer and whatnot. See, the problem with characters like the Flash, doesn't matter which one it is they run many, many times faster than light. You think about warp drive in Star Trek, you think about hyperdrive in Star Wars, the Flashes are faster. There's one story where someone was getting teleported to another spot in the universe. I think pretty much all the way across the universe because there's some kind of universal crisis going on and the Justice League had to help. So members were getting teleported. And the Flash just ran there. He ran there faster than teleportation across the universe. Somehow he was able to run through space. The Flash is powered by the Speed Force, and apparently the Speed Force not only destroys the laws of physics, but it allows situations like literally running through space. In most cases, any villain fighting the Flash, or any hero fighting the Flash could act and do what he needed to do to stop you before you even thought about moving or having any defense. He's faster than thought, he's faster than light, he's the fastest thing pretty much in the universe. He's outrun death, and death is speed in the DC universe. As you can see, now I'm sketching on this hand, and you think, oh, okay, this is going fairly quickly. Shouldn't be a problem. Well, you're going to see me erase and redraw things a lot, and even things that rewatching, I'm like, oh, I should have just left it. But for this one, I kind of wanted to go the extra. I wanted it to be right, so I kept redrawing and resizing and moving things until it was in a position where I liked it. I pretty much erased the whole thing and redraw it quite a few times, except for the faces, because the faces I've been happy with since the beginning. Everything else, not so much. But once we get through the pencils, the rest of it goes nice and smooth like everything else. And we get a pretty cool drawing of the Flash punching out Zoom. Okay, so comics are broken into time frames. The first one is pre-1939. That's called the Platinum Age, where you have heroes like Doc Savage, the Man of Bronze, the Shadow, the Phantom. People like that. They're more pulp heroes, not really superheroes. Although if you change their context and you move them forward a few years, they pretty much would be superheroes. They'd be more Batman-like characters. They wouldn't be more fantastic like Superman or the Flash. After that, you have the Golden Age. That's when we have the first appearance of Superman in 1938. The first appearance of Superman changed everything for comics. He's the first real superhero. It could be debated and you go back and forth, but it all started with Superman. After Superman, there was a bunch of other heroes introduced, and one of the early ones was the Flash. Except this Flash, the Golden Age Flash, his name was Jay Garrick. He got his powers from being exposed to, I want to say it was hard water, some kind of hard water experiment, and it made him super fast. He wasn't nearly as fast as Barry Allen or Wally West, but he was pretty quick, and in the Golden Age, a lot of weird things happened, so he was no slouch by any means. Then, superheroes fell out of favor, and there was a book published called The Seduction of Innocence. Is that right? I just stopped to look, and that is right. I do most of this by memory, and every once in a while I'll kind of forget something or I won't be sure of something, and I'll have to stop and look it up. And this is one of those cases. I usually only do it for dates and stuff, but I wasn't sure if that was the name of the book or not. But anyway, with The Seduction of Innocence, it was concluded that comic books were harmful to the developing brains of children, and parents, they had burnings, and basically comic books in general fell out of favor. And the only superheroes to continuously stay into print that time were Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman. Everything else kind of shifted to horror books, and then with the book came out, the horror books fell out of favor, and it's pretty much just bland romance books and funny animal books and books like Archie, which Archies were great. They got me started on comics back when I was younger. Go to the supermarket with your mom, and she'd buy you an Archie to shut you up, and then you go home and you read it, and you pretty much get one every time you went shopping, or we went to like the local convenience stores and whatnot, or we'd walk to Marty's Corner, and we'd always have a couple dollars in our pockets, and comics were 65 cents. 75 cents, so you always came home with an Archie until you discover the X-Men, and then it all changes. But so after that, superheroes fell out of favor, and it stayed that way until the 50s. Then in 1956, they decided to give superheroes another try, and the first hero they brought back was the Flash, except they didn't bring back Jay Garrick. They pretty much started from scratch. And they started with Barry Allen. His origin was he was a police scientist, and he was doing some experiment in his lab at night, and lightning shot through the office, and he got covered in chemicals, and he got struck by lightning, and he ended up with the powers of super speed, and so was born the Silver Age Flash, Barry Allen. Wally West came a few years later in the Flash 110, and his origin is pretty much the same. He was just visiting Barry in his lab, and lightning flew through the window and struck Wally. And when it struck Wally, he fell through the same chemicals that Barry fell through and ended up with the same powers. And they pretty much stayed that way until the 80s. When we get to Wally later, we'll tell you what the differences ended up being. The closest I ever got to owning the first appearance of the Flash, Barry Allen, was when I bought that small collection of comics from the mailman, Willie Nelson, that I talked about in the Batgirl episode, the Batgirl drawing. In his box, there was a lot of Flash. I mean, a lot. He didn't have 105, which is technically Flash number 1, but he did have Showcase number 8, and Showcase number 8 is the second appearance of the Barry Allen Flash. And I think he made 2 more appearances in Showcase. I don't remember the numbers, and those we're not going to look up. But then he was so popular, they decided to give him his own book. And back in the Silver Age, they didn't care about having a new issue number 1, and you always needed a number 1 issue to draw on readers, and the fantastic collectible super number 1 issue, that wasn't a thing. So basically, the Golden Age Flash, the last issue published was issue 104. So when they started the title up again, they just picked up the numbering. So the first Barry Allen issue of the Flash came out like 10 years after the last issue was published, and that issue was 105. So they just continued the number from the Golden Age forward. So technically, Flash number 1 from the Silver Age is Flash number 105. So you're not going to find a Flash number 1 from the 60s or the 50s. It's number 105 you're looking for if you're ever at that tag sale digging through Silver Age gold. Okay, the pencils are coming together, and we're getting ready to detail it up before we get into the inks. And this is where the kind of amalgamation of Barry and Wally happens, because the traditional Barry Allen costume is more of a bright red with very little dark in it, and they always show it bright. They never really put him in heavy shadow. And on the mask, his eyes are exposed. He's got the circles around the eyes like the big zoom head does here, and you can see his pupils. The traditional Wally West costume, after he became Flash and came into his own during the Mark Waid years, which is when I was reading The Flash, and that's what got me hooked on the character. He had a mask like the one you see right now, where you can't see his eyes, and he just has the white eye, no pupil, and they're not open or exposed. And there's a lot more black to his costume. It's almost like it's drawn to be metallic. So basically, that's what I'm doing on the costume here, because this originally started as just Wally West, but I decided I wanted to open it up and show his eyes. So that's why it's sort of an amalgamation. So you could decide if you want this to be Wally West or Barry Allen. When I was reading comic books, Barry Allen had already been dead for a couple years, and when I started getting into the Flash that I was reading was Wally West. And in the 90s, Mark Waid, he started writing the Flash series, and Mark Wernigo, he started doing the art. And it blew my mind. I had to buy that every month, and I was hooked. And he introduced more speedsters. He brought back Max Mercury. He was another Golden Age speedster. They introduced Impulse, who was another kind of a version of Kid Flash. He was, what the hell was his name? I think it was Bart Allen, and he was from the future. And he came back for whatever reasons, I don't remember. And his name was Impulse. And they also had Jessie Quick. She was another speedster. Her speed was based on math. She had to say a math problem before she could achieve speed. And I think they eventually did away with that because that was more of a mental block. And then she just became a normal speedster. And they met villains like Savitar and other speedsters that they had to deal with. And it was a good read every month. And it kept me hooked, and I bought every issue. So if you want to read some good Flash stories from the 90s, look up the Mark Waid and Mark Wernigo run. You won't regret it. I'm pretty sure they got some graphic novels. You can read it online on the DC app. And yeah, go for it. As far as villains go, Barry Allen and Wally, they have an extensive rogue gallery. In fact, it's called a rogues gallery because of them. His villains were initially called the rogues gallery. So when you talk about a rogues gallery from different characters, the term started with the Flash. You can see I opened up his eyes already, so now it has a mask more in line with Barry Allen, but the texture of the costume is more in line with Wally West. And the guy he's punching is Professor Zoom, going back to Flash's Rogue Gallery. He has a colorful Rogues Gallery. He has the Mirror Master, Captain Cold, all kinds of different guys with all these weird gadgets and powers, and somehow they always are able to go toe to toe with the Flash, even though he could think faster and move faster than they could come up with an idea. So in most cases, most Flash issues, comics, TV shows, they shouldn't last more than a couple seconds, because the Flash would wipe the floor with them before they took a step or thought of stepping. That's all of them except for Professor Zoom. Zoom is a different animal. He's from the future. He hates Barry Allen with a passion, and any other speedster. I don't remember exactly why. But he basically only exists to make Barry's life miserable. And unlike other speedsters, when you change the past, it has serious repercussions on the future. And it just makes a mess of the timeline and everything. Like there's a Flashpoint story where Barry decides to go back in time and save his mother. Because he's like, why can't I? I can travel through time. I could change things. And when he does, it changes the future for the worse, and you get the Flashpoint storyline, which we'll get to shortly. And right now, the pencils are done and we're starting the inks. So from this point forward, everything goes much faster. It just took a long time to nail down the actual drawing here in pencils. So Zoom, unlike Barry or Wally or any other speedster, he can actually go through the timeline, and he can change things without having dire consequences and really only affecting the person who he's changing the future for. Has something to do with he corrupted the Speed Force, and he's part of a corrupted Speed Force. So the normal rules of paradoxes and time travel don't really apply to him. And he literally exists just to make the Flash's life miserable. I guess now we'll talk about Crisis on the Infinite Earths. In 1985, DC decided their continuity was too out of whack and new readers couldn't catch on and pick up, and you had to know too much and it was a mess, and you couldn't just pick up an issue of Batman or the Flash and start reading it and know what was going on. So they decided to push the reset button. So doing that, they created a storyline called Crisis on the Infinite Earths, where a villain called the Anti-Monitor is going through the multiverse, and he's pretty much eating all the universes. And so heroes from across the multiverse get together, multiple versions of Superman, the Flash, Superboy Prime as he becomes known, and many others get together to stop the Anti-Monitor. And don't quote me on this, but I think it's issue 8. The Flash sacrificed himself. He runs so fast in an attempt to stop the Monitor and beat him that he literally disintegrates into the timeline. And he's basically dead. He was, for a long time, considered one of the characters that he stays dead. He doesn't come back. Him and Jason Todd were the two. They're dead. Leave them there. We've moved on. They're not coming back. But eventually, they brought Barry back, and we'll get to that too. So when Barry died, his sidekick, Kid Flash, Wally West, decided to pick up the mantle of the Flash. And he was going through a complex where he didn't think he was good enough and he couldn't handle the mantle of the Flash. And it put up a mental barrier to his power, so he couldn't run as fast as Barry. He couldn't do the speed of light. He couldn't travel across universes. He couldn't time travel. He could pretty much run the speed of sound faster. He could get into higher Machs and speed jets, but he could not run nearly as fast as any of the other speedsters. And he also needed to eat a lot to keep his speed going because it burned a lot of calories. So he was always shown eating or stopping at a hot dog stand or whatever. And so that was a limitation he had for a while until Mark Waid came up and he broke the mental barriers, and it ended up that Wally West is now the fastest of all the Flashes. They all get their power from a thing called a Speed Force, and Barry Allen technically is the Speed Force. The Speed Force is him. But Wally West somehow processes it more efficiently and can run much faster than any of the other speedsters. It's a weird, convoluted mess, but if anybody asks you who the fastest Flash is, I think there is some random Flash you never see who I think they say is faster, but the answer is Wally. Wally is the fastest of the Flashes. Throughout the history of the Flash has randomly had races with Superman. And it's always been kind of like a gimmick thing where there's no definitive winner, or one would win, and then a year later they'd have another race and the other would win. There's a fun race that happens when the Wally West run, early in the run, where he races Superman, and the race is set up by Mr. Mxyzptlk, a Superman villain. He's a fifth dimensional imp. He's pretty much all powerful. He's pretty high on the power tier in DC, even though he's kind of ridiculous and silly, and he just kind of likes to mess around with Superman. And the way you beat him is you get him to say his name backwards, and he has to go back to his home dimension, the fifth dimension. But he makes Superman and Flash race, and this is a slower version of Wally, where he could only run at like Mach whatever, supersonic speeds. But at the same time, they also depowered Superman after the Crisis on Infinite Earths. They sort of tried to ground his powers and make them slightly more realistic, because in the Silver Age, if you could think of it, Superman can do it. He had a new power every week, and he wasn't afraid to use it. So this Superman was much slower too, and weaker than the current Superman or the classic Supermans. So he couldn't run much faster than Wally, or he couldn't run as fast as Wally. They were on about the same level, because they always have Superman as fast, but the Flash is always just a little bit faster. And sometimes even that's up for debate. But so the way Mr. Mxyzptlk set up this race, I think I'm saying that right, Mxyzptlk sets up the race is that they have to run on the ground. Superman can't fly because it's an unfair advantage, because then he would be faster than Wally in these two versions. So he sets up a track, and they have to race around the world. And they have to follow the track over water, over mountains, through mountains, and it's a fun little race. And Wally has to stop every once in a while to eat and pick up hot dogs. Like he takes a hot dog cart and he runs by, he'll grab a bunch of hot dogs on the way. And there's a funny part of the race where they're running through a like an island in the middle of nowhere, and they don't notice what's going on. But Mr. Pitalik notices that Lex Luthor's there, so he says, "Hey, Lex, what's going on?" And Lex says he's looking for something, and what Lex is looking for is kryptonite, because after the reboot of the Crisis on Infinite Earths, kryptonite was extremely rare and did not really exist. Nobody had any. Batman didn't have any. Luthor didn't have any, but he knew about it, and he was looking for some on Earth, and he had a track on some there. And so he just blows off Mr. Mxyzptlk, and so Mr. Pitalik is going about his own way and going on with the race, but he sees a green rock and he picks it up and he's like, I wonder if this is what he was looking for. And it was a kryptonite rock, and he just throws it over his shoulder, and it's a funny moment. And I don't even remember who wins this race. I remember everything about the race, but who wins? And we're not going to bother to look it up, but it's a fun race. So if you want to look up that race too, it's a Superman Flash race from the late 80s. It's Wally versus Superman. It's a good race, and it's funny, and anything with Mxyzptlk adds a good sense of humor to any story. And apparently he's a universal constant, so every single version you've ever seen of Mr. Mxyzptlk is the same. Even if he looks different or sounds different or he's played by different actors, it's the same character, whether it's a movie, a comic book, a TV show, a cartoon. It's all the same Mr. Mxyzptlk. He's a universal constant. I said that twice just to punctuate that he's always the same. He never changes. On this one, as far as the inks go, I jump all over the place. Sometimes I'm working on Zoom, sometimes I'm working on the Flash, sometimes I'm filling in black, sometimes I'm dashing out lines. It's all because this one just fought me tooth and nail to the end. It didn't want me to finish it. Everything that could happen and go wrong did happen. In fact, there's a part of it where I'm shading at the end, and I totally lost the video. It's nowhere to be found. So you'll notice it'll jump from kind of like a splash of color to, oh look, the shading's almost done. So I apologize for that, and we'll talk about it more when we get to the colors, but I just wanted to bring that up because this drawing fought me every step of the way. The reason I bring this up, and the reason why I left all the pencils and all the erasing and the redrawing earlier in it, is because I want you to know it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to double think your idea. It's okay to change things. You don't have to stick to the plan. If something, you like it, you might not like it enough, or you think, hey, this would look better this way, or I'm not liking the way his back's turned, or the musculature in the back, and there's too much back, the shoulder's too big. It's okay to erase it and start again. I mean, you draw enough and you get to the level where that doesn't happen very often, but it's going to happen, and you're going to end up redoing things and redrawing things. And this is a prime example of it. But like I said, by the time I'm done, I'm extremely happy with it, and I love everything about it. But getting here was a bear, but the final result made it all worth it. After Crisis on Infinite Earths and Barry Allen died, he was supposed to be forever dead, because the trend of bringing heroes back and killing them off every other month wasn't a thing then, and Barry was considered dead. And then, of course, in the mid 2000s, early 2000s, they did a Flash rebirth, and he briefly appeared in Final Crisis before that. And then they did the whole rebirth thing to explain it and where he came from, and it's a big, long, convoluted mess. But at the end of the day, Barry Allen was back as the Flash, and eventually they worked it out so that Barry and Wally would both be considered the Flash. And they changed Barry's costume up a little bit so that his hair sticks out and it's flowing, and it's a silver and red instead of the red and gold. But they're both considered the Flash now. Okay, and here we're done with the inks, and it's time to color the Flash. I'm pulling a Firefly on this one. I actually drew and recorded this one before I did Bakugo, but for some reason I'm releasing them out of order. I don't know why. I think it's because I did the voiceover for Bakugo first, so I just said, screw it, I'm going to upload this just in case I don't finish the Flash tonight. And I did get to the Flash, so they're both pretty much done in the same day, but I already uploaded Bakugo, so he's going to keep his time slot and go up this Monday, and Flash is going to go up the next Monday. Not that you have any idea what I'm talking about, because you're just going to see them when they come out, and it's not a TV show, and there's no continuity, so it doesn't actually matter. But as you can see, I'm filling in the solid colors the old-fashioned way. I didn't learn about the whole selection fill thing, so I just trace around and I fill in the colors the way I've been doing all my life, which changes in the Bakugo one, which you saw last week. So on this one, I do shadows and I do highlights because you just got a big block of red and a big block of yellow, so you need to differentiate those two colors as much as you possibly can. So it needed the highlights. You couldn't just skip them or just not do them because they didn't feel necessary in this type of drawing. When you just got two big blocks of color, you need as much as you can to differentiate the two. And the background is a whole nother color. I don't do blue this time, so that's a plus. So that's a little different. We get a little Christmassy, you'll see at the end. Earlier in the drawing, I mentioned that the only speedster who could change the past and change the timeline without really screwing things up for the whole universe is Thawne, because of some wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey weird thing with his relationship to the Speed Force and the Anti-Speed Force, and just basically stuff they made up so that it would work in story, so that they could keep bringing him back even after they kill him. He's never permanently dead. He dies, he shows up. It's an earlier version of him, a later version of him, a mid version. His timeline is just so intertwined with itself that there is no beginning and end. There's just always zoom. So the reason I bring this up again is because we got to get to Flashpoint. Barry, in a moment of grief, I believe he was thinking about his mother. It was his mother's birthday or something. And he just wonders to himself, why can't I bring my mother back? I could travel through time. I could do whatever I want. I control time, basically. I can go wherever I want. So he goes back and he stops his mother from getting killed. When he does that, he comes back to our timeline and things are a little different. He has no powers. He's not fast anymore. He can't run. The things that are different is like Batman's different. Instead of being Bruce Wayne, it's his father, Thomas Wayne. Because when Joe Chill showed up in the alley, he didn't kill Martha and Thomas Wayne. He killed Bruce Wayne. So Bruce becomes Batman, except he's a more violent, angry Punisher type of Batman who carries a gun, he runs a casino, he doesn't run a Wayne Foundation, and he murders criminals. He doesn't let anybody off. And in another twist, the Joker is Bruce Wayne's mother. She lost her mind after her son died, and she became the Joker. And it just messed up the whole timeline. And Barry goes to Batman and he's like, I gotta fix this. This isn't how it's supposed to be. And he convinces the Thomas Wayne version of Batman to help him by telling him that in his universe, his son survives and he becomes Batman. So if you help me, Bruce is alive. So he tries to recreate the accident that gave him his powers in the Batcave by throwing chemicals on himself and getting struck by lightning. And it almost kills him, and it fries him, and it burns him. And kind of like in the Flash movie, if you saw the Flash movie with Ezra Miller a few years ago, when he ends up in the alternate timeline, and he tries to get his powers back, and he gets burned and cooked, and they play it for comic effect, but, it eventually works, and he gets his powers back, and he figures it all out, and of course Zoom's part of it, but he didn't really cause it, and that's the joke. He tells Barry, I had nothing to do with this. This was all you. When you came back to save your mother and change the timeline, you shifted everything just a little bit. So things happen just a little bit differently. Mostly the same, but just different enough to make it not the universe you know. And so eventually Barry goes and he fixes everything and brings it back. And it's not exactly right, but it's close enough. And then you get the New 52. The New 52 was another sort of reboot that lasted 52 issues, a year, and it spanned the whole DC universe. And when he fixed everything and the New 52 popped up, there was a glaring character missing. There was one character that I'm like, where the hell is he? And that character was Wally West. He was replaced by another Kid Flash, another nephew or distant future, and his name was also Wally, but it wasn't the Wally West we all know. And so it's like, what the hell happened? And they basically just erased him from continuity. But then after the New 52, they had a thing called Rebirth. Now I'm going from memory again, so I don't know how entirely accurate this is, but it's mostly correct. The universe is kind of off and things are different. And Wally is traveling through the Speed Force, or he's lost in the Speed Force. And he appears to Barry, and Barry doesn't remember him. And he reaches out to a bunch of people, and nobody remembers him. Linda, his wife, I forgot what happened to her, but she doesn't know who he is. His kids aren't a thing. And somehow, finally, he reaches out to Barry, and Barry remembers him, and he falls to his knees and he cries, like, "How could I forget you? You're such an important part of my life, an important part of the universe. How could we all forget you?" And the whole mystery is, what happened to the universe, and why was Wally missing, and where did it all go? And that led into, I forgot the name of the story, but where they bring Dr. Manhattan from the Watchmen in, and basically he's the one who's behind the whole New 52 and the rebirth, because he was toying around with the idea of building his own universe. He's like a kid in a toy box, and he's playing with his toys, and he ended up letting Superman win because he realized Superman was a universal constant, and he was the hope of the DC universe. Without him, it just didn't exist. So he let Superman save the day, and then we get the DC universe as we know it now, and where we are in 2025. We're going to go back a bit to where we were talking about Superman Flash races. And there was one in Rebirth. It wasn't really a race. Barry needed to go somewhere, and he was in a hurry, and it was some important thing, and Superman was trying to stop him because it wasn't the right thing to do or something. And he tells Barry, he's like, "Listen, Barry, we've raced a few times, and I've won a few of those races, so you can't run away from me. I will catch you." And Flash turns around and looks at him, and he goes, "Clark, those were for charity." And he just takes off, and Superman can't even touch his speed at this point. He's just gone, and there's nothing to do about it. And that was a pretty funny moment just to show you that they show Superman and Flash being sort of equal, but when it comes down to the wire, the Flash is always faster. There's also another story that revolved around Wally, where it's called Heroes in Crisis, where it takes place. It's a safe house for heroes when things get crazy and they just need to get away, or the heat's too hot on them and they just need someplace safe to be. There's this safe house that's been set up, and they can go there. And nobody knows where it is, and it's a heroes only thing, and something happens, and somebody's murdered there. I think it's actually Wally that gets murdered there, and the whole thing is, who murdered Wally? Who knew about this place? Who's the traitor? What happened? And it turns out the guy who killed Wally was Wally. Some crazy thing happened. I don't know. I only read parts of it. And Wally went back in time and killed his past self in a way to cover up for his future self and to solve the whole mystery of whatever was going on with him at the time. And in the end, they catch him, and he ends up not being dead due to some Flash time travel thing, and he breaks down, and they make him pay for his crimes or whatever. I don't know exactly how it ended up, but right now Wally's still a hero, and he's doing his thing, so somehow he overcame whatever happened there, and it's water under the bridge. But I always thought that was a weird story, that he was able to kill his past self with no real consequences, and he was trying, basically he was outrunning his own death, and it was kind of interesting. Back to the coloring, I'm glad I didn't go with a mashup on this one, even though it would have been cool to see Quicksilver getting punched out by the Flash, because he's like a rogue gallery, one of the Flash's rogue galleries. He wouldn't stand a chance. He's just too slow. At his fastest, he's not as good as Flash at his slowest. And it would have been a fun thing to do with his white hair and the blue costume, but I like the way the yellow and the red play off with Zoom and Flash, so I'm glad I went with Zoom. And I didn't even think of the mashup till I was telling a friend about it. I was like, "Oh, you missed an opportunity. You should have went with Quicksilver, because you're always doing these mashups, and it would have been cool." So, I mean, I don't think I'll do a Flash Quicksilver mashup now because that time has passed, but we're definitely going to do some of those. And I think the next drawing might be one or something similar, or I might do something a little different, but we'll figure that out tomorrow, because I'm going to start thinking about that and working on it then. Working on this Flash drawing, it just made me realize I never finished watching the Flash TV show, the one with Grant Gustin. I think I watched the first 5 seasons, and then I just kind of dropped off and lost interest, because it just seemed like every season there was a new speedster. They had to fight a new speedster, and everybody's life was at risk, or his daughter would show up from the future, and so I kind of fell off. So If anybody has watched that and you stuck this far throughout the video, let me know if it's worth going back and watching the rest of it, because I have no idea what happens at the end. So we're going back to kind of like the textured background on this one, because I didn't think it needed buildings, and speed lines would have been cool, but I found an old folder going through a hard drive of old textures that I had after a computer crash, and I was able to get back into the hard drive, and I found this one on here, and I figured, oh, that would be perfect for the Flash. It's kind of like swirling. It's motion. It follows the thing where he's punching zoom, and so it takes me a while to figure out the orientation that I like, but once I get there, I'm very happy with where this goes. As you'll notice, it's a little blue, but we changed that, and we get that going. And now we'll talk about the movies. The Flash movie with Ezra Miller. It started out kind of funny with the hospital and catching all the little babies and the horrible CG, but it was an interesting way to start the movie, and I kind of dug it. The Batman costume Ben Affleck wore was absolutely terrible, but the scene itself wasn't that bad, especially with the whole lasso of truth thing. And then when he travels back to save his mom, as in Flashpoint, and does the same things we talked about earlier. But when Michael Keaton shows up, that was my Batman as a kid, and like I said, we'll tell the story of that when we get to Batman. But that movie was pivotal in my need to know more about these characters and learn more of their past and histories, and to remember more. You can see the background. We settled on green, so we got the red of the Flash and the green of the background, so it's a little Christmassy. And we also are throwing a light paper texture over the top, because we have that strong texture in the back with the swirls, but there was nothing in the foreground. And again, I'm playing with the color modes because a few of the first ones, they all do different things. So I wanted to be sure that I got something that I was happy with. And now, as you notice, when I was penciling it, I had the motion lines for punching zoom in the face. And I didn't ink them in. And I didn't ink them in because I wanted to do them in color. So I decided on yellow and red and kind of orangey, because that's Flash colors and zoom colors, and it just works out. So I outline it in the orange, and we give the motion to the punch. So it's not as stale, and it kind of gives it a classic comic look from back in the day where this thing was comic, like the old Batman show with the bam, boom, pows, and floating in the airs when they hit people, or, all the old sound effects. So at this point, we just tweak the colors a little bit. We erase a little bit off a thumb because his thumb's in the foreground, not the background over the punch. And with that, we're pretty much done. And another drawing in the books, and another adventure with you guys' past. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you learned something from sitting around with me and drawing the Flash and Zoom, because this one is done. And I thank you all for joining me, and hit that like and subscribe button, because that's a thing we're supposed to do. And I'll see you next time, and thanks for being here.